Bonjour, welcome to Wahsa Distance Education Center's radio Zoom classes. This is SVN3E, grade 11 workplace science, and I am the teacher, Bronwyn Slade. Unfortunately, you can't participate live today as this is a pre-recorded lesson. However, if you would like to, you can still listen on the radio at 91.9 FM or on the television at Bell Express View channel 972. Our classes are scheduled on Monday through Thursday from 3 till 4 in the afternoon, and we are starting our 6th week of our 9-week course. But you definitely should be submitting some work for marking so that you can get your credit. All of the questions that you need to submit for marking are at the end of each of your IL lessons. So please do all of them. Some of them are check your understanding questions from within the chapter, though not all the check your understanding questions. So make sure you check the list. There are a few activities, and then there is also generally the review questions at the end of each chapter. Remember to show all your work and give me full sentences and complete ideas. So don't just give me one-word answers, or just formulate real answers that tell me everything that you know, but also make sure that you're actually answering the question as you go along. You can do it by hand or electronically. If you'd like to write in the workbook, you can, it is yours. So you can do that, that is fine. However, the spaces are small, so that might be tricky for you. Or you could do it electronically and type up your answers. You don't need to type up the questions, just the answers, and labeling it well is fine. If you're going to type it up, using Word or Google Docs are the easiest files for me to open. If everyone has an access to Google Docs through their NNEC account, if you need help with that, I'm happy to help. If you're going to use a different program, most likely that is fine. Just connect with me to make sure that I can still read your files. All right, there are 3 different methods for submitting your work. The first is to scan it if you wrote it out by hand and then send your files electronically. So if you're scanning it, you can use a smartphone or device to scan. If you have an iPhone, the Notes app or an Android Google Drive app, both those have scan functions and they're fairly straightforward. This just makes your files slightly smaller and easier to send. If you need to take a picture instead of doing that, that is totally fine. Whatever works for you is fine for me, most likely. And you can email it to studentwork@nnec.on.ca and CC it to bronwyn.slate@nnec.on.ca. Or you can also send it to me through Facebook Messenger at @bslatewahsa. Second method is to drop your work off in Sioux Lookout. We have an outdoor mailbox at 74 Front Street, or the bright red building next to the post office. And we have a small white mailbox next to our side entrance. The third method is to hand your work into your DEC. Your DEC can either send your work through the Express or fax it to 807-737-1732 or a toll-free fax to 1-800-463-7852. If you'd like to connect with me through social media, you can find me on Facebook and also on YouTube with the name @bslatewahsa. So if you subscribe to YouTube or find me on Facebook, you'll get notifications every time I upload one of our lessons. All of our lessons are recorded, and then I upload them shortly after airing and put them under a playlist on my YouTube channel that's called SVN3E. So that's a really easy way to access all of our past lessons if you've missed anything or would like to review something. Science is incredibly visual, so I strongly encourage you to access the videos. I use a lot of diagrams and images as well as videos in order to tap into as many different learning styles and ways of understanding this material as possible. So just listening to it isn't really going to set you up for the most success. If you can't join us when we have a live Zoom class and you don't have reliable internet to access the YouTube replays, that is all understandable. Just let me know and I can send you a copy of the recordings on a USB key or something so that you can still watch them. If you have any questions or concerns, please reach out and contact me. My email address is bronwyn.slate, which is spelled BRONWYN.SLATE@nnec.on.ca. My Facebook is under the name B. Slate Wahsa. My phone number at the office is 807-737-1488, extension 2209, or you can call me toll free at 1-800-667-3703. Our office hours are Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. So that's usually the best time to get a hold of me. And if you can't, leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. All right, I think it's important to start our classes with my positionality in terms of understanding how I view education and science and how that shapes the way that I teach it. So I have white settler ancestry, I have white privilege, and this has guided and shaped my education and my experience of education, how I approach learning and the things that seem normal to me, which means that I do not have a wealth of knowledge in the experiences of other people and how education might be their experience and how learning might be best for them. It is something that I'm working on, but it's not my natural state because I am a white person who's grown up in a white system, and the system has benefited me and shaped who I am. I do live in Northwestern Ontario on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe people and continue to observe and learn as much as I can in a respectful manner to honor the knowledge keepers of this culture in my community, and so that I can try to integrate those learnings into my teaching as I teach science and other courses. This is my first time teaching this course, so I do have lots to learn and unlearn. It is a process. It's most likely a lifelong process, though hopefully I get more comfortable and more knowledgeable over time. If there's anything that I am doing that is ineffectual or incorrect, please let me know. I'm happy to change as I go. Also, our textbook is incredibly Eurocentric, so meaning that it centralizes the white experience as the normal experience, as the soul experience, and it definitely ignores Indigenous, Inuit, and Métis knowledges and experiences. That's just missing. It's absent from the textbook as far as I can tell from what I've been reading through it so far along with us. I haven't picked up any problematic language yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was some, and also I may have missed some, just as it isn't something that I'm necessarily aware of everything that could be problematic. If there's anything that is concerning that you'd like to address, please let me know and we can address it as best as we possibly can. All right, we're in Unit 4. We're talking about using energy in our lives. And part of this is thinking about alternative methods of energy sources. So this example here is that if we were to put solar panels on 50 football fields, that this would be able to generate enough energy that would be the equivalent of removing 33,000 cars from the road. So just in terms of the lack of the emissions made from coal power plants. So there's a lot of different things that we could be doing, but it's hard to know how they work. So we've talked already how renewable and non-renewable energy sources actually work. And now we're going to be talking about the costs and benefits of them. So this is lesson 14, the costs and benefits of using different energy sources. Our learning goals are that at the end of this lesson, you will be able to discuss the environmental costs of generating power using nuclear, coal-fired, and hydroelectric generators, and that you will understand the advantages and disadvantages of several alternative generation strategies. The success criteria are that you've met the learning goals because you know the costs, the extraction and of use of coal, natural gas, and nuclear energy. You can explain the benefits and challenges of wind, hydroelectric, and biofuel power. All right, so non-renewable and renewable energy sources all have costs and they all have benefits. We need to consider the financial costs, the availability, and the environmental impact when thinking about the pros and cons of sources. So we're going to focus on 2 examples, as for every situation, there are different costs and benefits. So we can't, it's too extensive for us to focus on all of them. We just don't have that capacity at this point at this level of study. Something you could look into more if you are interested. So the first example, we're going to look at the major fuel sources in Ontario. So Ontario's power grid is based off of, has historically been based off of primarily of fossil fuels. So we've already learned about the environmental costs of burning fossil fuels because it releases carbon dioxide, nitrous oxides, carbon monoxide, hydrocarbons, sulfuric oxide, heavy metals, and other pollutants into the air, the soil, and the water. Historically, coal has been the cheapest fuel for generating electricity, and that means that many of our generators in Canada are designed to burn coal. So shutting down plants and changing them so they can be used by different energy sources can be really expensive, and therefore historically has been a reason why that hasn't happened. But as of 2014, Ontario no longer uses any coal to generate electricity. That was a goal, and that has been achieved. So here you can look and see that coal in 2003 was 25% of the way that we generated our electricity, and now it is at 0%. Nuclear was 42%, and now since 2014 has been 60%. Gas has all gone down from 11% to 9%. Hydro has been fairly consistent from 23 to 24%, and non-hydro renewables has gone from 0% to 7%. So we're increasing in some of our renewable energy, but mostly coal. Most of what that moved from where coal moved was to nuclear energy. So in 2019, approximately 94% of the electricity generated in Ontario was emissions free. So this is great in terms of the fact that we don't want to be contributing more pollutants to our environments and increasing the issue of the climate crisis and the problems of greenhouse gases. But there still are issues and there's still waste. This isn't saying that it's 94% of renewable energy or waste-free energy. It's just saying that it's emissions-free. Because all of these other than coal, all of these other energy supplies have costs too, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. So natural gas is cleaner than burning coal, but it still produces greenhouse gases. Also, the process of refining natural gas destroys wildlife and habitats. And more, it's becoming difficult to find natural gas reserves, meaning it's becoming more and more expensive. So in 2006, the cost of heating a 2-story 4-person house was $1,618 for the year, which is high. And then it dropped by 2012. It was only $924 per year. So there was this big push for people to use natural gas because it was getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. But now we're back up to, well, in 2014, now we're back up to $1,184 per year. I wasn't able to find more recent data. So it's very likely that in the past 6 years, it has increased more. So natural gas is often thought of a cheap source of energy, and it can be cheaper than other things, but it still produces greenhouse gases. It still emits pollution that is concerning, and it's still really dangerous and really detrimental to extract it from the earth. We're not talking too much about that process, but just extracting it and refining it is dangerous and pollutes a lot as well. So it's not a perfect means of energy at all. And then we're finding it's difficult to get more. So it is still a non-renewable resource. So we could use it all up and not be able to tap into anymore. So we have nuclear energy, which is, as we saw back in that previous chart, where now 60% of our energy is coming from. So Canada is now the world's second largest uranium producer, behind Kazakhstan since 2009. In your workbook, it says that Canada is the largest uranium producer, but that was because it was published before 2009. In 2016, Canada's share of world uranium production was 2%, which was worth about $2 billion. More than 85% of mined uranium in Canada is exported. So a lot of what we're mining in Canada, we are selling to other places in the world. And there are 19 CANDU nuclear reactors in Canada. 18 of them are found in Ontario and 1 in New Brunswick. It is cleaner than other fossil fuel power, as nuclear reactors do not emit the pollutants that contribute to global warming, acid rain, or smog. But it still, again, has its own costs. Here's a map of Canada that shows where there are mines. So the yellow dots are uranium operating mines. So where they're currently extracting uranium, there's a lot of that in northern Saskatchewan. That's where all of the current operating mines are. Then there are the purple ones are the proposed mine sites, which again are in northern Saskatchewan. I don't see any other proposed ones. There's some former mines, which in northern Saskatchewan, the green ones, and in Ontario, southern Ontario. There's uranium fuel cycles in southern Ontario and nuclear power plants in southern Ontario and New Brunswick. They don't list all of them because there's 18. That would be a lot of knots. So you can sort of see really the production is happening in northern Saskatchewan. So that's where it all is happening. There are investigating more proposed sites in Nunavut, in Ontario, and in Labrador that they're investigating to see if there is more uranium that they can tap into. But uranium mining is banned in British Columbia, Quebec, and Nova Scotia. So it's an interesting reality that it can be banned in some places of the country and quite productive and be actively looking for new mines in other parts of the country. So another thing about nuclear energy is that the power plants are expensive to build and also to maintain. And mining uranium emits carbon dioxide, nitric oxides, VOCs, particle matter, and sulfur dioxide. So even though the burning of it doesn't emit these things, or the use of it, when we mine it, we're still emitting those toxins. So the waste from uranium mining and nuclear power plant generation is also dangerous and difficult to dispose of and store. So yes, we're using a lot of energy. We're getting a lot of energy from it, and we can get a lot of energy from it, but mining it is still toxic. And then we have waste afterwards, and that is also very toxic. So currently in Northwestern Ontario, or over the last few years, there's been conversation about there being a nuclear waste dumping site in Ignace along Highway 17. And this has been a bit of a process over the last 3 or 4 years, but there haven't made a finalized decision yet in terms of if this is actually going to happen. I think 2023 is when currently they're saying the final decision is going to be made. But I thought it would be interesting to get a little bit more information about that, because I really only in the last couple of months have seen signs go up saying no nuclear waste in Northern Ontario, Northwestern Ontario, and this wasn't anything that I knew about. So I feel like most folks probably don't know too much about it, and that's really problematic that we don't know. This is a long video, it's almost 25 minutes. We are not going to watch all of it. I'm going to jump around to a couple of different parts so that we get a little bit of some different perspectives. But if you're interested in watching the entire video, I will link it in our show notes so that you can view it there. It's not a YouTube video, so I can't link it on YouTube in our supplementary videos, but just go to the video on this class, this lesson, and then it will be in the notes underneath the video. There'll be a link there to go to this video, to this site, and then you can play the video. It's going to pause. There's a little bit of political stuff that you can go in and check it out if you like to, but let's just focus on the environmental elements of at this point. All right, we're going to pause it there. So we've only watched about not quite half of it. So again, there is much more. If you'd like to check it out, feel free to. But we just don't have time to cover it as well as everything else. So what I found was interesting in those sections was that the two different sides of it. So the mayor of Ignace talking about how it will be economically support and a boost for Ignace and how that will be beneficial for the youth in terms of there being potentially steady work of working in this, whatever this deposit, this nuclear waste site would be. But then the Roy Ignace and I can't remember Dupuy, or I can't remember her first name, talking about how the ripple impact that will be on the communities as well as on the natural land, and how Roy Ignace talked about how the fact that it's going to fail at some point, like it's not, it might be thousands of years from now. It might not be this generation, it might not be next generation that has to deal with it, but it will fail most likely at some point. And then we're leaving this problem for future generations to deal with. We're creating a problem, we're creating something for them. And that he doesn't say this, but I believe that that's unfair. And then Dupuy talks about in terms of the animals in the natural environment, like how it will have an impact on the insects and the moose and the wolves, or what she said, but like all of the plants, all of the natural world in the area are going to be impacted. They don't talk about it too much, but I find it very interesting in terms of that a remote community or a largely indigenous community are the places that this sort of thing is being considered, again, because of, like Roy said, there's less people to fight, there's less information, and how the various people in Saugeen talk about how there's just not communication about it, and that this isn't okay, and that isn't necessarily how it would be in other communities, and that's really concerning and oppressive, I believe. So I think that it is a complicated issue, and I think that economy is important, and people not living in poverty, people having comfortable stable incomes is really, really important, but I don't know if nuclear energy is the way to create that. Maybe we need to be investing in people and in energy in different ways. So that's talking about just the actual plants, but then talking about the dangers of mining uranium, there's also those challenges. So when mined, uranium ore has to be ground up and then mixed with an acid or alkaline, so acid or basic solution, so people can take out the uranium. The waste, or they're also called tailings, left over from this process consists of rock particles, water, chemicals, and radioactive contaminants like heavy metals. About 85% of the radioactive elements in uranium remain in the tailings. So we're not very effective in terms of using up. I don't quite understand it, but I don't know if that 85% would be something that we could use if we were able to access it. But we're putting all of these chemicals and all of these toxins into the earth, and we're still not using, we're using a very small portion of what we get, what we receive. There are 24 tailing sites across Canada, and we produce 500,000 tons per year. However, that number, I couldn't find a more current number, so I don't know if that has, I would assume that has increased because the amount of energy that we've used from uranium has increased, and so I assume that's probably increased as well. So at the time, that was enough tailings, enough of this waste to fill Toronto Water Centre or the Sky Dome more than 100 times over. So here is a picture of how the tailings work. So it's runoff or slot, like it's dumped into a pond type or some sort of fixture. And in theory, it's lined with some way in order to make it so that the tailings don't impact the surrounding environment, but it also often leaches into the environment around it. Here is a image of what it actually looks like. And so you can see the pond over here where the tailings are. And you can just, this is what, one of those tailings looks like. And then just for fun, I threw in a picture of the Sky Dome of the Rogers Centre in Toronto. So you can see how big it is in case you haven't ever seen it up close, or an image even of that up that close. And if there's 100 of these that we can fill with nuclear waste, that's intense, because if you look down, this is an aerial shot, and you can see the cars beside them and the little people. So you can just see how big the Sky Dome really is. And 100 of these is what we can fill with waste. So that's a lot of waste. So the tailings leach into the groundwater and the surface water, and polluting water and soil. They carry radioactive dust and radon gas from the tailings. And these pollutants affect the wildlife habitats and also the communities near the mines and tailings. So this is part of what they're suggesting to put in Ignace. So for example, like if caribou in northeastern Saskatchewan eat lichen that have been contaminated by radioactive materials because of it's close to a mining site, then people who eat the caribou increase their chances of getting cancer at a rate of 6 new cases of cancer per 1,000 people, just because of the radioactive material in these communities. So tailing sites need to be managed carefully forever, because radioactive material does not break down for hundreds to millions of years. So this isn't a short solution. We need long-term solutions. And it is also true of the waste, the nuclear power plants. It's not just tailings, but also the waste that we need to deal with. All right, so now you can do the key questions on page 112. Check your understanding questions 1 and 2 that talk about burning fossil fuels and natural gas and nuclear energy. Okay, so now let's spend a little bit of time talking about wind power and other renewable sources of energy, but what the cost and benefits are of those. So Ontario leads Canada in capturing wind power as most of its wind farms are located along the shorelines of the Great Lakes. We have that access to that great resource. Wind power is cleaner than nuclear power and fossil fuels, as its environmental impacts are smaller, and it also requires little land. Building wind farm requires research and careful planning, so that's a big investment upfront. And developers must consider a number of factors to make sure a potential wind farm will be economically viable by producing enough power to justify spending money to build it. So they want to decide this before they invest in that. So in order to decide that, they must research the following criteria and make sure that it meets their standards. There needs to be adequate wind speed. So wind speed and weather must be measured at the site for at least a year to find out if it's a good site, which makes sense. They want to see if it actually makes sense to capture the power within the wind. It needs to have a low environmental impact. So wind farms should not have any sort of negative impact on the environment, particularly thinking about bird migratory paths. If this affects any sort of bird's migratory paths, then they have to move it. They can't, it's not reasonable to put it in that space. They need to talk to the hosts, so the landowners where the wind farm area will need to be to host the turbines. They make a yearly profit if they allow turbines on their land. But also a sensible bottom line, so it all comes back to money, right? So the wind farm must provide enough energy in its lifetime to offset the initial and maintenance costs. So that's something to make sure that it is really worthwhile where it goes. So then we look at hydroelectric power, which is the second greatest amount of energy in Ontario's power grid, right? Which we looked at the chart before. And these are the large scale, high impact hydroelectric power plants. So the really, really big ones. And they also don't emit any air pollutants or have any wastes or emit any greenhouse gases. So that seems like awesome, right? That we're not creating any pollution due to when we're generating hydroelectric power. However, they have negative impacts because they can severely impact the aquatic and riverbank ecosystems, as well as human communities when dams are built and an area is flooded. So that can totally wipe out ecosystems along the rivers or change it for the aquatic ecosystems as well. And then it can displace people. Lots of places in the world it's displacing people, and often poor people of the global majority are the ones who are being displaced. Buildings, dams are expensive. They are extensive, big buildings and big structures. So that's a big investment. And water quality can decrease as silt gradually fills up lakes instead of flowing downstream. So if we're stopping water or containing it, then that means that everything that was generally carrying also gets stuck too. So some suggest that it would be better to build low impact hydro plants from now on, as they are smaller and that changes their impact. And with careful planning, they would cause only as much damage to riverbanks and aquatic ecosystems as natural flooding, drought, or erosion would, which are all natural systems that natural environments can recover from. So low impact hydro dams currently contribute about 6% of Ontario's total power generation. So they're a small part already. Here is one example of a low impact hydro dam, just to see how it's quite different than those big, ginormous ones that really change the environment. Right, so now you can do the key questions on page 114, check your understanding 1 and 2. And finally, we're going to talk about biofuels. So any vehicle that burns petroleum diesel in a compression engine, so a diesel engine, can use an alternative fuel source called biodiesel. There's another biofuel that can be used in gasoline engines, though there are conflicting opinions of whether or not that's a good idea. So we're not going to go into it too much, but we will sort of talk about it in general. So biodiesel is a type of biofuel made from plant or animal oils, either fresh or recycled, or it also be made from algae. It is made through a chemical process that separates glycerin from the fat. And so then two products can be used the result of that. So the methyl esters equal the fuel, and the glycerin you can make soaps and other cosmetics from. So we're going to watch a video about biofuels just to sort of get an over understanding of what they are and also some of the pros and cons, if it's going to work for me. No, it's not going to work for me.
Are combustible fuels created from biomass. The term biofuel is usually used to describe liquid fuels such as ethanol and biodiesel that are used as replacements for transportation. Alcohol formed by fermentation is used as a replacement for or additive to gasoline. Biodiesel is an oil produced by extracting naturally occurring oils from plants and seeds. Biodiesel can be combusted in diesel engines or blended with diesel fuel. Biofuels are in three categories based on the type of feedstock used to produce them. First generation biofuels are produced from food crops. For ethanol, feedstocks include sugar cane, maize, and others. For biodiesel, feedstocks are natural such as soybean.
All right, so that gives you an overview of how biofuels are made and what they are, as well as some of the concerns. So this is the chart that is in your booklet, in your workbook. Now it says it's based on 2009 figures, which is 15 years ago. So it is very different in terms of the costs. So petroleum diesel is still available at most filling stations, but it does not cost. I don't even understand this in terms of $0.0924 per liter. It's not. Yeah, I don't understand how that is, because currently I don't know if it's talking about a barrel. Like, I just don't get it, because right now our diesel is like $1.95 per liter at the pump. So I don't know if this is saying it at the pump or saying it somewhere else. I just don't understand. I tried to understand. I don't understand. But it has an environmental impact. So it's very cheap, but has an environmental impact. So greenhouse gases and sulfur dioxide emissions contribute to global warming, smog, and acid rain. Biodiesel, on the other hand, has a few retail sites in Ontario and British Columbia, so it's not very accessible at all. This says that it costs $1 per liter. Again, I tried to look up the information to make it current, to update it, and I couldn't find any sort of pricing for biodiesel in Canada. I don't know if it's just because it's rare that it's not information that is accessible. I'm not sure. So I'd say the cost is really not very relevant for this, but in theory, it's saying that biodiesel is more expensive than petroleum. The environmental impact is that it reduces greenhouse gases, and almost no sulfur dioxide emissions occur if pure biodiesel is used. If it's not made from recycled sources, plants that have been used for food, that could have been used for food, is being made into industrial fuel. So this can cause food shortages, water shortages, price increases on crops like corn and rice. And so this is something that's concerning in terms of where are we putting our energy and what is more important. Is it more important to feed people, particularly people who are impoverished, or is it more important to create this fuel that you need to have a very particular type of vehicle and is expensive to be able to use? So that isn't the best. It doesn't, when you start to think about it on the surface, it might seem really good, but there are costs that are significant behind the surface. Okay, so looks like I forgot to change the lesson and title. So energy costs and benefits is what this one's called. So natural gas and nuclear. So the infrastructure are set up and it has a high energy return. That is a benefit, but it has incredibly high levels of pollution, of pollutants and waste, and it is also non-renewable. So we are going to use it all up and not have it anymore. So wind and hydro, there are no emissions or waste associated with wind and hydro power, but it is a really large initial financial investment, and it doesn't return as much energy as fossil fuels. So in terms of thinking about value, we need to adjust our expectations and what we believe is important if we're going to use wind and hydro more. And then biofuels, that it's more renewable than fossil fuels because it is faster to regrow the plants that it is used to make the biofuels, but really asking, are there less emissions? There's different debate in terms of, you do more research in terms of how much, if there truly are less emissions, or if they're different kinds of emissions, or there's just different concerns. Do we need to not change our system? So if we're not reducing our energy consumption, if we're just replacing with something, is that really the best plan? Is that really setting us up for success in the long run, or are we just pushing the problem till later? And what about the fact that we're using food to create fuel? And what does that mean for the people people in general in terms of food shortages and food prices? It's something to consider. So our success criteria are that you know the extraction costs and the costs of using coal, natural gas, and energy. And we don't just mean financial costs, but also the environmental costs. And that you can explain the benefits as well as the challenges of wind, hydroelectric, and biofuel power. Right, so you can now do the key questions on page 117, the review questions 1 through 15. All right, that is our lesson today. If you have any questions or concerns, please reach out and contact me. This is why I'm here. You can call me at 807-737-1488 or toll free 1-800-667-3703. My extension is 2209, so you can leave a message for me there if you miss me, and I will get back to you. You can email me at bronwyn.slate@nnec.on.ca or Facebook me at bslatewahsa. Remember, our class YouTube channel is bslate Wahsa, where there's a playlist SVN3E that has all of our lessons as well as the supplementary videos that are available through YouTube there as well. I hope you have a lovely day. Thanks so much for joining me. Miigwech.